Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that you are here. I and my colleagues have put 49 people who are madly in love into a brain scanner using fMRI. 17 had just fallen in love. 15 had just been rejected in love. And in our most recent experiment, 17 people who were in their 50s and long married, and an average of 21 years of marriage, and they reported that they were still in love with their partner. So I want to discuss this research very briefly, and then go on to discuss my very newest research on something else, why we fall in love with one person rather than another. Around the world, people love. They sing for love. They dance for love. They compose poems and songs and stories about love. They retell myths and legends about love. They have love charms, love potions, and love magic. They pine for love. They live for love. They kill for love, and they die for love. This brain system is one of the most powerful brain systems that has evolved. In fact, I think it's much more powerful than the sex drive. You know, if you casually ask somebody to go to bed with you and they say, no, thank you, you don't kill yourself. But around the world, people suffer from real crimes of passion. So in 1998, I began to study the brain circuitry of romantic love, what the ancient Greeks called the madness of the gods. And what we found is, we found an activity in a lot of brain regions, but the most important one, perhaps, is it's called the ventral tegmental area, the VTA. It's a tiny little factory near the base of the brain, and we found activity in something called the A10 cells, cells that actually make dopamine. Dopamine is a natural stimulant. As a matter of fact, we found that this is exactly the same brain region that becomes active when you feel the rush of cocaine. And it's part of the brain's reward system, the brain system for wanting. As you reach for a piece of chocolate and want it, as you want to have a drink, as you want to win a prize, it's this reward system that's activated. It's associated with craving, with focused attention, with energy, and with motivation. In this case, the motivation to win life's greatest prize, an appropriate mating partner. So after doing that study, I began to think to myself, you know, who cares if we know about what happens in the brain when you're madly in love? The problem is when you've been rejected in love. That's when somebody becomes a pest. That's when we suddenly become a menace to ourselves and to society, when people begin to stalk, a great deal of clinical depression, and certainly some people commit homicide or suicide. So I started to put 15 people with my colleagues into the brain scanner who had just been rejected in love. And indeed, we found activity not only in the same ventral tegmental area that makes dopamine, but also in a long reward pathway associated with profound addiction. Romantic love is an addiction. A perfectly wonderful addiction when things are going well, and a perfectly horrible addiction when something's going poorly. Somebody's camping in your head. In our most recent experiment, led by Bianca Acevedo, we began to put people in the machine who reported that they were still in love after an average of 21 years of marriage. And indeed, we still found activity in this same ventral tegmental area that makes dopamine. You can remain in love. I'll say it again. You can remain in love long term. We found only one real interesting difference between those who had just fallen in love and those who were in love long term. And that was, we suddenly found less activity in a brain region associated with anxiety and new activity in a brain region associated with calm. So I think what's happening when people say that they're in love long term is they can't wait to see their partner, they want their partner to come home for dinner, they want to share their lives with them, they want to have sex with them, they want to go on vacations with them, but when they don't get an email at lunchtime, they don't go out and drink all afternoon. Instead, this high anxiety is replaced with calm. Love is many things to many people, but it is, for me, primarily a drive. This is what I sort of the bottom line of what I've come to understand. It is a drive. You know, there's many, many descriptions of romantic love around the world, but I think the best is summed up by Plato. He called love, he said, the God of love lives in a state of need. It is a need. It is a drive. It is a homeostatic imbalance. It is a brain system that evolved millions of years ago so that we could focus our mating energy on just one person at a time and start the mating process. And it can last for life. But why do you fall in love with one person rather than another? This is what the dating site Match.com came and asked me. I just finished my book on the brain circuitry of romantic love, and it was 2 days before Christmas, and they called. I answered the phone. They called up, and they said, would I meet with them 2 days after Christmas, which in New York is sort of astonishing. This is sort of a long free time. So I met with them, and in the middle of the morning, they asked me that question: why do you fall in love with one person rather than another? And I said, I don't know. I study why we're all alike. You're asking me why we're all different. I do know this. I did know this at the time. This is basic psychological data. Timing is important. You fall in love with someone when the timing is right. We tend to fall in love with somebody from our same socioeconomic and ethnic background, somebody of the similar degree of intelligence, of good looks, similar educational level these days. We tend to fall for somebody with the same religious and social values, with similar goals, and certainly your childhood experiences play a role. But you can walk into a room where everybody is from your background, your same level of intelligence, same level of good looks, and you don't fall in love with all of them. So I began to think maybe basic body chemistry could play also a role. You know, we're constantly saying in America, and I think also in Mexico, we have chemistry, or we didn't have chemistry. So I began to think, what does this mean? Maybe I should look at basic body chemistry and see if it naturally draws you to some people rather than others. So I took the job with Match.com, created a new dating site with them called Chemistry.com in the United States. And I developed a questionnaire based on genetic studies, a great many biological studies. And then 8 million people have now actually taken this questionnaire in 40 countries, including Mexico. There's 2 million people actually on the Match.com site in Mexico. And found out, I think, one of nature's patterns of why we're drawn to one person rather than another. So I'm going to go very rapidly through these 4, what I found and why we love the people that we love. The first thing I did is I looked through all of the biological literature. There's a great many chemicals in the brain that code for the blinking of the eyes, the beating of the heart, etc. There's very few chemicals that have been linked with personality traits. And indeed, these 4 basic chemical systems, the dopamine, norepinephrine system, serotonin, testosterone, and estrogen and oxytocin systems, have been associated with a constellation of personality traits. So I'm going to go through them and then tell you why we're drawn to certain people rather than others. Those individuals, I made up a name for each one of these types. I'm not crazy about the name. Oh, rats, you can't see this. Oh, well. I call them the explorer, the builder, the director, and the negotiator. These are not cubby holes. These are brain systems. We all express the constellation of traits associated with each of these chemical systems. But indeed, we have personalities. Some people are more curious than others. Some are more conventional than others. Some are more agreeable than others. And these personality traits tend to lump together. So I'm going to go through the 4 broad styles of personality and then show you who's drawn to whom. The explorer, I call them the explorer. People who have certain activity in the dopamine and norepinephrine system. They tend to be novelty-seeking, risk-taking, energetic, spontaneous, impulsive, enthusiastic, optimistic, sexual. They're the most sexual of the 4 types because dopamine actually triggers testosterone and triggers the sex drive. They're highly creative. In fact, if you take L-DOPA, which they give to Parkinson's patients, creativity often goes up. More flexible, more adaptable, and of course, in the green, you can see some of the downside of this personality style. I did one study of 178,000 people on Match.com to see what kind of words these people use. You know, you fill out a profile of saying who you are and what you want, and the top word used by this high dopamine, norepinephrine type of person, the explorer, is adventure. Also energy, new, fun, traveling, passion, active, all words that are likely to be associated with the dopamine system. I think Barack Obama is a very good example. A daring man, very risk-taking. Anybody who's black in America and tries to become the president is a risk-taker. The whole world believed him when he said he wanted change. That energy, that need for novelty and change, I think, comes in part from the dopamine system. Highly energetic man. What's interesting about him is how optimistic he is. You know, there was The Onion, it's a humor magazine in the United States, and the day that he won the election, the lead on the humor magazine was "Black Man given worst job in the world." And indeed, he got the worst job in the world, and by God, he's optimistic about it. The second very broad temperament dimension associated with serotonin. These people tend to be conventional, traditional, cautious, but not fearful. They're not scared, they're just cautious. They're calm, they're social. On scientific studies of close friends, they tend to have more close friends. They're managerial, they're networkers, they're very cooperative. They're orderly and persistent. In fact, that persistence, academics call that sustained attention. They're very good at doing something over and over again. Conscientious, loyal. They respect authority. They like rules. The explorer, high dopamine type, is not big on rules. They'll follow them if they work for them, but otherwise they don't. They like schedules, these people. They're very religious. In the population of 40,000 individuals that I studied, they were by far the most conventionally religious. And they're good with numbers. It's called numeric creativity. They have a downside, of course. They can be stubborn and closed-minded, moralistic and controlling. The words they use, the top word is family. Also morals, respect, trust, trustworthy, use that one twice, values. I think a good example is your president. I think also Colin Powell in the United States. I was going to say a little bit about him. I'll skip that. And on to the director. The director, I don't like the term director. Plato had a much better term. He called them rationals. I'm stuck with these terms, though. Analytical, logical, direct, decisive. They understand what scientists call rule-based systems, everything from math to computers to mechanics to engineering to music. I think Beethoven, music can be, is very structural. Not to me, I'm very much of the explorer type. All I do is swing to the beat. But if you are high on testosterone, you tend to see the structure of music. They're skeptical, they're competitive, they're emotionally contained. You know, you'll watch on television a man or a woman who's emotionally contained, and they're moving only their mouth, none of the face, not just the mouth. It's an expression of high testosterone. Also very independent and self-disciplined. And on the bottom, of course, poor verbal and people skills. I think the top word that they use is intelligence. There's a lot of different kinds of intelligence. But what they think is intelligence is the long, deep, focused understanding of a particular topic. They like the word debate. In fact, I did a study recently of 5,000 individuals, and the director regards debating as intimacy. The other types do not. Geek, nerd, ambitious, driven, politics, challenge, real. They gotta have it real. They're the least religious of the four types. Sarkozy, I think, is a perfect example of the director. You know, he called, there was after the G20 meeting in London a few months ago, he called Obama weak. And indeed, Obama is not weak. It's just that the testosterone type tends to like to hit you in the face, and other types sneak around and hit you in the back. Hillary Clinton, I think, is a very good example of a woman who's high on testosterone. You can be high on testosterone and estrogen, low on both, high on one and low on the other. As a matter of fact, a lot of American football players actually are very high on estrogen as well as testosterone. She's extremely blunt. Every time I read about her in the New York Times, some other culture is absolutely astonished at her directness. The last of the four broad personality dimensions is the negotiator. People who are expressive of the estrogen and oxytocin system. They see the big picture. They're very imaginative. I think imagination is different from creativity. They've got very fine verbal skills, good executive social skills. They're good with people. Intuitive, they climb into your brain and know what to say to you. Trusting, nurturing, emotionally expressive, agreeable, and egalitarian. The words that they passion, real, heart, kind, sensitive, reader, these are the readers of the world. Random, they like the word random. The other types, no director really likes the word random. They like order, they like to see the patterns. These people, for some reason, use the word random. I think Bill Clinton is a good example. I read his book. He's got verbal skills. He can't stop talking. The whole world knows he can't stop talking. Real people skills. It's good that our government sent him into North Korea to get those two girls out rather than his wife. Extremely emotionally expressive. At the Democratic convention, he cried when his wife made her speech. And he's well known in the United States for saying, "I feel your pain." He probably has more mirror neurons than many people. So I designed a questionnaire to see to what degree you express all four of these broad personality dimensions. That has now been on the dating site Match.com in 40 countries. As I said, 8 million people have taken the questionnaire. And so I decided I have 8 million of these circles here. I decided to see who was going to be drawn naturally to whom. So my pointer's not working, I wish it were. But you can see up there the female explorer goes for the male explorer. The male explorer goes for the female explorer. The female builder goes for the male builder. The male builder goes for the female builder. In this case, as we say in America, birds of a feather flock together. Female director goes for the male negotiator. Male director goes for the female negotiator. Female negotiator goes for the male director. And the male negotiator, Bill Clinton, goes for the female director. In these cases, opposites attract. So I basically think what's going on when you start to looking for a partner, you walk into a room, you scan the room. Within a tenth of a second, you take a look at somebody, they're either in or they're out. Too tall, too short, too fat, too thin, too old, too young, too scruffy, too scrubbed, they're out. Then you walk over to them, if they remain in, and they open their mouth. And if they have the wrong accent, they're out. If they have the right accent, you keep talking to them. Then you discover their goals. You discover that they voted for Sarah Palin and George Bush, and they're out. And all along the way, there are these breaking points as you discover their goals. Can they give you what you need? The right lifestyle, your experiences play a role. But all along the way, I think these biological constellations of temperament traits play a role. So this is what I did a couple of weeks ago. I have 5 million people in America who've taken this questionnaire, and we've got everybody's zip code. So I decided to see, well, where do these people live? And sure enough, you take a look at California, it's all yellow. That's the explorer. Everything that's loose rolls into California. The Midwest and the South is largely builders. They're traditional, conventional, much more religious. In the red you see the directors, they're all around Washington, D.C., or they're out in Nevada gambling with spatial games, or they're in Alaska shooting the animals, more spatial tasks. And last but not least, the green is where the negotiator, the high estrogen types, men and women, flock. The Northwest and the Northeast are the most liberal. They're the biggest readers. And I would add that they are also more expressive of the estrogen and oxytocin systems. So I will close with this. I think it's important to know who you are so that you can reach who you love. And not only know who you are, but know who the person is that you love. And I think this reminds me of that message. It comes from the fact that women tend to get intimacy from face-to-face talking. We swivel until we're looking straight at each other, what's called the anchoring gaze, and we talk. And I think this intimacy comes from millions of years of holding that baby in front of your face, cajoling it, reprimanding it, educating it with words. Men tend to get intimacy from side-by-side doing. As soon as he looks up, he'll look away. And I think this comes from millions of years of standing side by side, sitting side by side in the grasslands of Africa, looking over that grass, trying to hit that buffalo in the head with a rock. The problem comes, of course, when we see people who are different. Thank you.